have to have the courage of our convictions and be proud of being Conservatives.
So we decided to set up blue-collar conservatism.
Having spent 20 years working for the Royal Mail as a postman, I feel most at home at blue-collar conservatism.
This is about people saying what they want us to do. So it's actually reversing the way politics is being done at the moment.
I'm supporting blue-collar conservatives' campaign for a police.
The effects of blue-collar in the last few months has been incredibly positive. The fact that everything we have talked about is like school funding, like more police officers, is either government policy or soon to be government policy probably tomorrow afternoon.
And why not have a drink and celebrate Boris being on New Year's? We'll have to call him now blue-collar Boris.
We believe that the Labour Party does not speak for working people and that this party speaks for working people.
I grew up in South Yorkshire and it's one of those places where you utter the words, I'm a Conservative, and it does kind of feel like something that you shouldn't really admit, but I do, because I'm really proud to be a Conservative.
I cannot wait for constituencies like the North East through blue-collar conservatism to do really, really well.
We can be that blue-collar revolution.
The Tory party is now the Heineken party of politics. It is reaching the part of the country that other parties cannot reach.
Elected as a blue-collar Conservative from a traditionally Labour seat, a path that many have just followed.
Driving forward the blue-collar Conservative agenda.
Joining our happy throng, it's Brendan, hashtag king of the swingers, the biggest swingers.
But I would say there's another part too, which wasn't covered, which what I would call a kind of blue-collar conservatism.
Myself and other MPs in the blue-collar conservatism group promised during the general election we would be on the side of hard-working families if we got it.
How many people are brand new to the Conservative Party? That is quite a lot.
The podcast is called Blue Collar Conversations. It came from a series of pub visits. That's where most of my great ideas have come from too.
Make sure we hold some of these seats in by this time.
Thank you for joining us for day 4 of our Blue Collar Conservatism conference. Today we're in Birmingham and we'll be meeting the wonderful Mayor, Andy Street, and our new Black Country MPs. First though, we go on a journey around Dudley with Marco Longhi, whose priorities for his area are, as Boris would say, jobs, jobs, jobs. We get to meet local residents and also business owners who talk about how having a job and well-being goes hand in hand. But we want to hear from you, so email us at opinion@bluecollarconservatism.co.uk. And if you want to join in our conversation on social media, then it's hashtag BCC 2020. And later we'll be hearing from Michael Gove when he answers questions on Brexit and lockdown. When we go live at 8, we'll be at a pub with a couple of MPs, so why don't you join us, crack open a beer and have your say.
Hi everybody, this is Marco. I'm the MP for Dudley North, and with me here today is a chap called Wade Cooper. Now Wade has done amazing things in the community here in Upper Gornal, which is part of the Dudley North constituency. And with this building, he's had a massive impact on the local community, but less from me, more from Wade. Wade, what have you been doing here?
The building was a derelict old youth club, and it was like it's been smashed up by the kids. I'd been in here myself as a kid and got banned, and it was like it was just a waste of a building on a park as well. Obviously a lot of ground on here that you could put to use, and like using the local community, the businesses and things. We've got a lot of like help, just a lot of donations, cash, like all the equipment and the radiators, the stuff, and we just built it on the community basically. Obviously, just before COVID, we had a lot of stuff going on here. Like events, massive things. We had a big Christmas event which you come to.
I remember that well.
And we used our drama class, we used all the boxing class, the dance classes, everything we did here, we put something on the stage there over Christmas, like a play and that. And we had our over 50s groups going on, and it just all crumbled in March. Everything come down. Our over 50s all got told to isolate. All the kids were stuck at home. So what we tried to do was, we tried to raise some money. We used the kids to raise the money by doing like sponsored walks and stuff, and then with the money we raised, we just spend it on meals and like delivering the meals to our over 50s club, and then a few of us who we got told for who were stuck at home. So like we used it just, but there was no proper support. We've done it all on our own back, like, you know what I mean? We've just raising money, and then we went and just, it was only like cob and sandwich crisps, and some of us started doing hot meals towards the end, and that was, it got a lot through it, like just going to see him a few times and that. Yeah, this is our gym area. Like what we try and do, obviously the kids are in here when they're the boxing and whatever, but our over 50s group twice a week. Obviously now it's been stopped again, but like this can be turned into like just a basic boxing gym, or we can get all the equipment out and do different sorts of classes. We've had kickboxing here, yoga, like dance classes, drama. We've had a lot of stuff in here.
I don't know if you've ever been on a Zoom call with me, but you'll always see in the background the Black Country flag, as you can see here. And just look what you can see in the ring there, in the four corners, the Black Country flag. So Dudley is the capital of the Black Country, and the Black Country, it's in the name, isn't it? So it talks about the historical industrial legacy. So these are communities here that have suffered a lot in the last several decades, because you've had a lot of industry that's migrated to the Far East. People have lost their jobs. I call them sometimes the forgotten communities of the Midlands. So part of my plan here is to work with people like Wade, bring a lot of investment into Dudley and change these things. Boris Johnson came and delivered his visionary speech, jobs, 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 here in Dudley. And that sends a very, very clear message that he is on our side, and it's great. As a local MP for me, that's just fantastic.
Put your left foot forward. Luke and you, left foot forward. As a child, I was skiving school, ended up getting kicked out in year 9. Never got no GCSEs, couldn't get a job, so I started committing crime, and I just lived the life of crime. I used to earn money from it, that was my job, basically, and I ended up going to prison, and I got like a 10-year jail sentence. When I was in prison, I just did all my qualifications. I loved it. I just started learning stuff, and I just got like I buzzed off it. And I did all like decorating, paint decorating. I was a qualified chef. I did all my like maths, English, business studies. I just did everything I could do. I just love learning, and when I come out, obviously I was a different person. It was kind of like my university, do you know what I mean? And then just getting the kids off the streets and trying to help people who was in my position. Basically, that's the aim here, and that's what we was doing. We still do now, but obviously with lockdown it's a little bit difficult. But I can relate to the kids that other people can't really get on with, or they ain't got the time for. So, and we've done a lot up here. We've helped a lot of kids.
This is what Boris is talking about when he's talking about the levelling up agenda, isn't it? You know, this is all about, you know, what you're doing, and the fact that we want to change people's lives, because for decades now they've been stuck, and by levelling up, it's because these people are hard-working, they've got the talent, they've just not had the opportunity. So now with the agenda for levelling up that we've got, with the support of people like Darren, that even before we're able to bring the support, he can show people that there is a sense of purpose, there is something we can do to help ourselves. It's just great. So the mix is fantastic now. I see a really exciting future for Dudley.
I'm allowed to go on the treadmill. And without that, I just seize up, having a stroke 3 years ago. I need to do some form of exercise. Rehab's shut at the moment, so this keeps me going.
It's the only place that we go out to. We don't go to pubs or anywhere else. We just come here. And we've been really sad to think, like, because lockdown's coming again, that we're not going to be allowed to come in here again. But we can go to a pub, which to be in a pub and have a coffee or a drink isn't the same as being in here, because we've built up a lovely friendship, and the friendship goes beyond these walls. We share with others. We've got a little allotment outside. We started growing vegetables this year, and then we've been picking them and they've been cooking them. Not excellent, but we're learning and more want to join in.
So one of the great things that Wade is doing here is the fact that he understands the community, young and old. And what he's done within the Wellbeing Centre here, he said, you know, young people are really into the gadgets, into the music, into internet, podcasting and all the rest of it, and he's created this little space here, and what he's got is some young people who want to come in and create their own music, do some DJing, create their own podcasts, and that sort of thing, you know. So there's something for everybody going on here. There was a girl here who was telling me that she'd written this song, and it was really quite moving, because it was like a rap type song, but she told a story through it, and it almost brought you to tears, because it was her story of abuse and domestic abuse at home, and it was clearly a great way for her to release her story and for her to be able to move on. And with Wade's input here, he's like kind of given her a sense of purpose as well, in terms of what her future might look like.
There's a lad locally, like I'll mention no names, he committed suicide last weekend, and he'd been knocking my door for like a couple of days to get up here. But obviously it was my mate's son, and it's just like, I could have cried my eyes up when I'd heard, and like my wife said he was knocking the door. But personally, like I've been having a bit of a bad time with my wife, and I was staying away. So it's just like, it really made me think. So what we said here was on a Wednesday, but obviously we can't do that now. We started to do like an open session, 1 till 2. If you want to get involved in the gym, if you're struggling with anything at home, anything at all, pop in, and we can have a chat and help.
Yeah.
And it's a way to get them in the door. Yeah. It's their time, free tea and coffee. And I think that would have been a massive help, that would. But obviously, with the 6 rule or lockdown, it's going to stop that. So I can see that the mental stage of things is going to be massive this time, especially without the sun.
So I'm Shaun Bailey, and I'm the Member of Parliament for West Bromwich West, and I wanted to show you a bit of my community today in Wednesbury, Oldbury and Tipton. So there's 2 things I'm going to look at today. One of them is community spirit, particularly through our sport, and the other is through our housing. So I'm going to take you to 2 very different parts of my patch and show you 2 very different elements, but both part of the same community, and show why these 2 priorities of community activity and housing are going to be so important for our blue collar areas in this country. So if you want to talk about community, there's nowhere more so for us in the Black Country than our football clubs, and this is Tipton Town Football Club, who've been here for nearly 80 years. They have been bringing young players up through the ranks, giving hope to people in communities like this that have often been ignored for far too long. So I'm here today to chat to the guys at Tipton Town, find out what their priorities are, find out what their concerns are, and also see how clubs like this are making sure that blue collar areas are getting the recognition they deserve.
Giving these lads who we've grown up with since they were 8 years old a chance to be playing at high level football for the first team is where we're aiming, but it helps develop these guys as young men as well.
And supporting clubs like you guys, how are we going to do that? Because we've got to make sure you guys keep going with what you're doing.
Pure and simple, expect money. We rely heavily on sponsors. You'll see we've got sponsors for our shirts, but we also have to charge these lads a monthly fee. Cash is tight these days, everyone knows. You know, we pay for the pitch, for the match days, we pay for the referee, we pay for training facilities. Anything that can help us with that, or better facilities that we can share with the local community as well. Like this fantastic pitch we've got.
Shaun, as I've said already, you've done more in the few weeks that you've been involved than anybody, politician, any of the, well, the other guy was, I ain't going to mention his name, but he was, Shaun, he was a toss-up. Bluntly, I can only talk bluntly. He never once came here when we had floods, never once. You have done more in the few weeks than any of them at any time in 13 years.
It's all about quality of life, isn't it? It's all about sense of purpose. It's all about health and well-being. And, you know, if you get up of a morning and all you can aspire to is to watch whatever's on TV, you know, then that's not a good place to be, is it? But if you get up of a morning and you've got a wealth of things that you need to dedicate yourself to, from a mental health perspective, you feel you've got a sense of purpose, which will guard against us going down the road of thinking bad things. So for me, jobs isn't just about people actually earning money, it's about that sense of self-worth. Pelé described him as the greatest footballer he had seen. This is Pelé, but he was such a down-to-earth person, just as you would expect any Dudley person that you meet, but he was a pillar of the community as well. So you've seen Wade a few moments ago. He was just like that as well. There was nothing he wouldn't do to help people, and such a mature head on such young shoulders, and such a sad and tragic loss. So it would be like how, am, which is like are, yeah, you. How am you?
Boston is great, good, fit us food. Apple is apple. If more people are in work, there's more going into the economy, there's more people picking up a wage and there's more people coming out to the pub. So, yeah, it would help us if... I do fear that there's going to be a lot of job losses, but this... What's the scheme?
Kickstart.
The Kickstart scheme's a really good idea. Unfortunately, because we're such a small company, we can't train apprentices on that scheme, but they are coming up with solutions, possible solutions.
Yeah.
Get this flipping virus out. It weren't a bad swear word, but I was going to say you can cut that bit. I'll think what needs improving is the businesses more coming together and trying to move forward. And I mean, Brexit's just a distant memory with all the pandemic happening. You know what I mean? So it's sort of, it's clouded a lot of people. But I think if the businesses and the local community were to come together, and I just think that everything will be more positive. But I am optimistic. I'm that type of person anyway. They're the salt of the earth. They really are. They really are the salt of the earth. There's no holes barred. I'm not putting the Black Country down. I'm not putting Dudley down because I love Dudley. I wish I'd have come and moved into Dudley years ago. You know what I mean? They're really, really good people, and you'll always find a friend in people. In Dudley, our customers are absolutely wonderful.
I got threatened a bit on the head by an old man, so I asked him to sit down.
You done what?
He threatened to hit me on the head with his walking stick because I asked him to sit down.
There's an old man that's very resilient, and we get the same every time he comes in. I don't want to sit down. Well, sorry, we can't serve you then. I don't want to sit down. Well, OK then, we're not serving you then. OK, I'll have a beer. And then he looks at him, raises his walking stick at him.
Yeah, he goes, I'll let you with my stick.
I'll let you with my stick. He's old. So to try and explain to him and tell him, because we're literally instructing him to sit down, it's not the norm in a pub, in a public house.
We need that
it's
vaccine,
not. Yeah.
We just need the vaccine. When Boris chose Dudley as the place to come and give that visionary speech about what he wanted to deliver for the country, particularly places like Dudley, was about jobs, jobs, jobs. He actually said build, build, build initially, didn't he? But that translates to jobs, jobs, jobs. So we've got a metro extension, we've got the investment into the Institute of Technology. I want to build, if possible, and bring in a university campus, so jobs for the future as well. It's about connectivity, which means also the metro extension that we're going to be building as well. So new jobs will mean moving people around, and it means the new skills. So it's going to be about retraining those people who've been stuck, as I mentioned before, but it's also about people, the teenagers of today having those opportunities rather than just either getting stuck here or moving away completely down south. So we need to retain that talent here, and the way we do it is by creating those opportunities. So it's about jobs, and if we have those jobs, we've got a community that therefore is reborn, that gets that sense of aspiration, that sense of self-worth, that sense of purpose in life that will drive them forwards for their children and their grandchildren in the future.
Every job's being impacted. It's just sick pay and all that. So if you don't go in, you only get £90. Even if they've got the kronos, they've got to go to work to pay for the food and the bills. So there's a bit of common sense there, isn't it, too? This is where the government doesn't realise people who are on furlough with the private jobs, they get full pay. It's a low paid workers.
I work in retail, yeah, I have done for like 10 years. And comparably, I work for charity retail, so we're still really, really busy. We're getting constant calls from people, can you come pick this up? I need to donate it. So instead of donating, they're actually throwing it away.
Business rate thing was great, but it was obviously very late, at the end of the day. We were struggling through lockdowns, and, thank God we had the website. I doubt we would be here if we hadn't have got the website, let's put it like that.
We've been on this store since 1976. We've never seen anything like that we did in the past 6 months. My father's passed down a few generations. But with the lockdown maybe coming again now, some of the traders are thinking about packing up altogether. We just can't continue.
Stevenson, and last year I was elected to represent Wolverhampton North East. Wolverhampton's my home city, and I wanted to stand for Parliament because There is such a lack of opportunity in this city for young people. We have high unemployment, especially youth unemployment. I also wanted to get the Brexit done that 7 in 10 people in Wolverhampton North East voted for. I'm here today at Akron Gate. I've been out on a community litter pick, which was enormous fun, and I'm now looking at these fabulous new homes built on the site of the former Goodyear factory. Andy Street, our West Midlands Mayor, and I share the same commitment to Brownfield First, and I'm delighted the government has funded the National Brownfield Institute in Wolverhampton North East. With construction training at the college and the Brownfield Institute, we've got a real opportunity to build the homes we need, to lead the way, to get more jobs, better homes, protect our green belt. Wolverhampton North East has only had one previous Conservative MP in the 1980s. In December, they voted Conservative to get Brexit done. 7 in 10 people voted to leave the EU. Also to keep Jeremy Corbyn far away from Downing Street. Blue-collar conservatism is absolutely key to representing people in Wolverhampton North East. They have suffered from that lack of opportunity, a lack of good jobs, lack of training opportunities, and levelling up is absolutely needed in a constituency like this. This is 3 Tons Parade. There are some brilliant, hard-working local businesses here. They don't feel supported by the council. We need to show them that the Conservative government, we're absolutely the party of normal working people and of business.
My political scandal would definitely be to have an affair with the top Russian female spy, but I wouldn't tell her anything, honest.
Well, if Parliament came out of London, where would I want to be? I would want to be in Manchester Town Hall because I'm a northerner.
If I took Parliament out of London, I'd probably put it in Manchester to give more power to the north.
I would say Manchester, because I'm a bit biased because I like Manchester.
I think I'd like to base it in Carlisle, primarily to wind up Nicola Sturgeon, but more realistically, I think it would be fantastic in York.
If I was Prime Minister for the day, I would make it compulsory for everybody to at least once in their life work in hospitality, because I think it teaches you humility, it teaches you to respect others, and it gives you a lot of patience. So I would definitely make it compulsory for everybody. It's like a national service to work in hospitality at least once in their careers.
If I was Prime Minister for the day, I'd get up very early and I'd go to the offices of ITV in London and then the BBC, and I would have an interview with Piers Morgan, and I would be ready for him, and I would speak straight to him, and I wouldn't let him speak over me, and I would make sure that I got my point across and put him in his place.
If I were the PM for the day, I would arrange to go and have tea with the Queen.
If I was Prime Minister for today, I'd read all the classified documents because I love watching Ancient Aliens on history channels.
I would stop jumping about. I would make a decision and I would stick to it. I would not be so willing to listen to all the experts because they are often wrong. Common sense, and I would stick with the decision.
If I could have anyone in the cabinet who wasn't a politician, he's actually died, but it would be Les Dawson because I think he was witty, funny, but also was sharp. He had a good head on him.
If I could have anyone in my cabinet that wasn't a politician, I'd probably choose Jeremy Clarkson because I think he's quite funny and has good views.
Which politician, dead or alive, would I invite to a dinner party? For me, there can only be one option. That would most definitely be Winston Churchill. He's an incredible orator, a charming man, well-travelled, an inspirational leader, and a drunken scoundrel. Therefore, the ideal dinner party guest.
It's got to be Winston Churchill.
Dennis Skinner. He was still an MP at the age of 90 years old, and I loved him.
Probably Benjamin Disraeli. He was a very cool guy. He worked for a very strong female monarch, and he was revolutionary for his time.
Well, I would have Andrew Neil.
It's got to be Margaret Thatcher. And the reason I say that again is because I'd like to personally thank her for what she did for my father, who was a coal miner. He lived in what then was a coal board-owned house, and I know that he longed to have his own house, and it was almost an impossibility until Margaret Thatcher came along.
How has the image of the West Midlands changed?
Oh, I think the image of the West Midlands has changed dramatically. So traditionally seen as post-industrial, something of a declining region. Nothing could be further from the truth now. So I think we're seen as young, confident, maybe just that little bit more cocky than we were. And if you just think of the wins over hosting the Commonwealth Games and Coventry City of Culture next year, people are thinking about what's going on here in a very different way.
How has the region reacted to the coronavirus pandemic?
So the pandemic's been really tough here. Right at the beginning, back in March, level of infections were much higher here than the rest of the country, excluding London. But the thing that I've been struck by is the real sort of sense of common purpose, responsibility, incredible camaraderie, and of course, remarkable community spirit. And we actually saw the level of infections come down very quickly because in the main, people obeyed the rules really very, very well. And of course, we now find ourselves with additional restrictions in 4 of our boroughs, Wolverhampton, Sandwell, Solihull and Birmingham. And I'm very confident that people will respond in that really responsible way once again.
How is the region changing politically?
So it's been very interesting to see the political changes here. You might have assumed this was a sort of Labour heartland, but actually it's changed significantly. We now have 14 Conservative MPs, 14 Labour MPs, so equal, and we now have control of 3 of the metropolitan councils, Dudley, Walsall and Solihull, so pretty much equal with the 4 Labour councils. And what I think is also happening is people are really responding to the message I put out there that we call this urban conservatism, about thinking about opportunities for a young, diverse group. And of course, they're thinking about the red wall seats. And the whole distinguishing point has been it's the Conservative councils, the Conservative MPs that really are delivering on the ground. People like that business-like approach to that Conservative leadership.
How was the region's economy performing before the pandemic struck?
So pre-pandemic, the region's economy was in pretty good shape. There are still issues that aren't right. I know no one can ever say the job is done, but we were growing faster than anywhere outside London, 27% growth over 5 years. We were seeing record levels of investment, highest ever job numbers, and actually Britain's moving to the West Midlands from other parts of the country. So lots of the stats were really, really positive for us.
How was the investment improving the lives of local people?
So if you think what difference was this investment really making to individuals, I think there's a few really good examples where this is about practical differences. First was actually about house building. We've increased the rate of house building 40% in 2 years. The huge majority of homes on brownfield, and actually a good proportion of them being affordable. So for young people looking at their first opportunity to get into either a home to buy or to rent, bluntly put, there was more property coming to build. So that's really practical advantage. And then if you think of transport, we were also seeing investment in a metro being extended, new railway stations, new rapid bus routes. So again, it was becoming easier for people to move across the region to get to the jobs that may be in a city centre, and most importantly, connecting communities that perhaps had not been that well connected before. So a really practical difference there. Then of course there were the new jobs in the digital sector, in particular in the electrification sector. So some really good high paid jobs coming through, and that of course is what led to this region growing its productivity twice as fast as the national average.
How can the West Midlands bounce back?
So there's no getting away from the fact COVID's dealt us a harsh blow. We were growing well, but that has been put into reverse. But clearly we've got a couple of really big unique opportunities. City of Culture next year, That's going to bring lots of people here, so the jobs around that. And of course, the Commonwealth Games in 2 years. And that's about £1 billion of investment and is already creating jobs in the construction of the venues. Then there are some other of the big public sector projects, and none is bigger than HS2, of course. There are literally thousands of jobs in HS2. But perhaps the most important thing about bouncing back is thinking which are going to be the new industries of the future, particularly the digital industries, the new technology industries, and particularly green, clean growth there. So we've got some distinct advantages, and we've also got those opportunities to sort of take a leap forward, and that's how we'll rebound.
What have you got planned?
So some things we've already got planned: City of Culture, Commonwealth Games, HS2, lots of investments in our own transport, further investments in new housing, pushing on that. We get a really good market, we've got to sustain that. That looks good. Schemes, even through lockdown, have been given planning and starting the cranes in the ground. But what we've also done in terms of our plans is we've said to government, these are the things that we really need to actually leap forward to recharge our economy. So that's about a battery factory here, we call it the Gigafactory. It's about the creative industries, particularly in Birmingham city centre, and one of the most exciting of all, I think, in Wolverhampton in the Black Country, around what we call a Brownfield Institute. Part of the university there looking at the skills and specialisms in that brownfield reclamation. So we've tried to get a number of high-tech things which are unique to us.
What's your message to the people of the West Midlands?
So my message is really simple. Our priority is, of course, beating COVID. And we will come together to do that, and every single citizen has a responsibility by following the rules as they develop. But beyond that, we've got to think about the rebound. We're in great shape, addressing some really long-term issues, and what we've got to do is maintain our confidence, focus, make sure the investments that we talked about do come through and they provide jobs and opportunities for our young population.
I have to say, being a cabinet minister in 2020, what a year. Some people say something like Brexit comes along once in a lifetime, but you're not expecting COVID to be hot on its heels. So as somebody who was doing and is doing the preparation for Brexit and COVID, what sort of a toll is that taking on you?
Well, it's you're absolutely right, Esther. It is tough sometimes being a cabinet minister, and these are two of the biggest challenges I think that any government has faced. But one of the things we benefit from is that the PM's giving really clear and strong leadership on both, and they are connected in a way. You know, some people have said maybe we should just delay Brexit and have an extension because of COVID. Actually, that would be a big mistake, because it's only by being outside the EU that we can have all the flexibilities that we need in order to support our economy and to make sure that people's jobs are protected. And also, as you know, we're giving £20 billion a year to the EU. We get less than half of that back. Once we're out, we can have that money, we can spend it on our priorities like the NHS, and of course we can also spend it in those areas that need our support economically.
So this is the Blue Collar Conservatism Conference, and the Blue Collar voter was the biggest supporter for Brexit. So they've appreciated the robust way that you've been dealing with, and David Frost's been dealing with the negotiations. But I think what they want to know is there won't be any last-minute capitulation, that you will see this through and they will get the deal that they believe in, and they won't be tied to the EU any longer.
I can completely understand that there are some people who will have looked at the past 3 years and thought, look, we voted in 2016. When are we eventually going to get the end of this process? Well, it is coming on December the 31st. Boris couldn't have been clearer. We wouldn't have a majority if it weren't the case that blue-collar working-class voters across the country had voted for Boris. We know that we have got to deliver on that promise. There's no turning back. And we will absolutely make sure that whether or not we get a deal with the EU in the course of the next few weeks, we're out. That's it. December the 31st, no single market, no customs union. We take back control of our borders. We have a points-based immigration system. We're able to spend our money on our priorities, on the NHS, and on making sure that people's jobs are protected.
And the fishing rights?
There's no way that we're going to back down on fishing. My dad ran a fish merchant's business. That business went to the wall in the 1980s as a result of the EU and their common fisheries policy. So it's personal for me. But the PM and David Frost have been crystal clear with the EU. These are our waters, these are our fish. We're going to decide who has access to our waters on our terms. And that's what you'd expect any independent country to do. In the past, in some of the negotiations we've had with the EU, I think we bent over backwards to be accommodating, and we didn't get the benefit of the doubt as a result. So now we're going to be absolutely crystal clear with the EU, as we have been over the course of the last few weeks. Look, if you're not going to talk Turkey with us, that's fine. We can leave. We can say that's it. No negotiated outcome. We're ready, come what may.
Because I think people were concerned about that. I know we don't know exactly what's going on in the negotiations, and it's just what you've read in the papers, but it seemed that there was a possible wobbling over the fish and the fishing rights.
You can completely understand. One of the things about these negotiations is that the EU have this sort of Kidology approach. They try to use tactics to make voters in Britain and British politicians worried. I actually think one of the reasons why they're coming out with this now is that they know that actually in these negotiations we have stood firm throughout. They're trying to say to EU politicians, oh look, the Brits are wobbling on this. We're not. And the thing about all of these negotiations is that when the EU are talking about us making concessions, they're the ones who are making concessions.
And I think people didn't quite understand what was the internal markets about. Can you explain a little bit? Because I think there was confusion in the papers about that as well.
Well, I think there was a lot of confusion. One of the things about it is that the PM was perfectly clear, and as a government we were perfectly clear, that we were prepared to be criticised by everyone in order to safeguard the UK and to deliver Brexit. So, the BBC commentating classes and, the SW1 bubble, people here in Westminster were all criticising the Prime Minister. But I think people across the country, certainly I know from, my family and friends, were thinking, thank heavens Boris is standing up. And the whole point of the Internal Market Bill was to say to the EU, look, you have not been playing fair. You've not been negotiating as we would have expected. If we don't get the deal that we both want, then you can forget about some of the provisions that you were expecting. We're going to take our own measures in our own way to safeguard the whole of the United Kingdom and to make sure, in particular, that Northern Ireland stays part of the UK and that you can't use Northern Ireland as a Trojan horse to try to undermine the independence of the rest of the UK.
And do you think Brexit will be used by the likes of Nicola Sturgeon, who's agitating to break up the union? Do you think it will be used?
Nicola Sturgeon will use anything to try to break up the United Kingdom. The whole point of the SNP is to smash the United Kingdom apart. And they will manufacture any grievance, create any trouble they can, and use any issue that they think might work to their advantage. But actually, once we're out of this transition period, once we take back control of our waters, then the SNP will have to argue to people in the northeast of Scotland that they should hand back fishing waters to Brussels. They'll have to argue to people across Scotland that an independent Scotland should lose the pound, and then what? Get the euro, or have its own currency? And then people in the SNP will have to say that they want a hard border between Scotland and England. So the reality of Brexit actually means that Scottish independence will be less attractive than ever before, and that's one of the reasons why Nicola Sturgeon and others are trying to stir the pot now.
Though she does do it very successfully.
Well, one of the things I think we all know is that, there are some politicians who've got a gift for being able to grab the agenda, and that's one of the things that Nicola Sturgeon does, and that's because she's had a long training in politics. But, Boris is more than a match for her, and we need to be clear that actually, there are some people who might think, well, if the SNP really want to be independent, then... But actually, if we saw the breakup of the United Kingdom, that would have a devastating impact on defence. Where would our nuclear deterrent be? It would have an impact on our capacity to attract inward investment into this country. People would ask what the future is. We have a proud history and we've got a great future in the United Kingdom. We're stronger together, and we should never be afraid of making that argument to the SNP, but also reassuring people in England that we all benefit. Because ultimately, there are working class people, blue-collar voters in Scotland, in Aberdeenshire and in Ayrshire, who voted to leave, just as people did in Lancashire and in Yorkshire. And far more unites us than divides us, and that's something that we should concentrate on.
And something we're also concentrating on at the moment, obviously, is COVID. And I think the message coming through from the blue-collar voter is, why does government now think it's going to micromanage us? Not feeling that everything that we are doing in our daily life is being micromanaged. And when is that going to stop?
Yeah, it's really difficult. This has been one of the most difficult challenges I think that any government has faced, and Boris was reminding the Cabinet just today about, as you mentioned earlier, Esther, the combination of coping with Brexit, coping with COVID, and coping obviously with the difficult economic circumstances that we face. I think we all know that we've got to control the virus in the interests of the vulnerable. That means that all of us have to make sacrifices, but we're well aware that we have to be vigilant in making sure that we protect family life, that we need to make sure that we deal with the virus now so that people can enjoy Christmas together. Those sacrifices are real, but I think most of us want to be in a situation where we've managed to control the virus, life can return to normal, and the good thing about people across Britain is that they're commonsensical. One of the things that I've learned in politics is that you can get a better sense of what the right policy is by trusting to the common sense of the British people than by paying attention to some of the commentators who are well-paid critics but who've never, had to cope with the real-life decisions that millions of blue-collar and working-class voters have to cope with every day.
And to be fair, the broadcasting media are suffering from the way they've covered COVID, because actually trust in the media at the moment has diminished quite substantially, because people think rather than a ding-dong, an old political way of dealing with this, actually we're on a learning curve together, and they would have far rather have got the information out rather than having you were wrong. Everybody felt they would have sooner have gone on a journey together.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people want information. They appreciate it when the government levels with them. Not everyone will agree with everything that the government is doing, but people recognise this is an unprecedented situation. Yes, the government's made mistakes. People can be forgiving of that if the government is honest about them. But I think you're right. I think that the particular style that some star presenters have of trying to trip up people exasperates and annoys people. They want to have the facts, the information, and they also want to see support for the NHS. And again, this is where COVID links with Brexit. One of the reasons why leaving at the end of the 31st is so important is that we can get that money back and invest in our NHS.
And I think you've also seen this week a struggle within the Conservative Party, because we say we are the party of the people, of democracy, and we don't like it if we see that government is telling people what to do and not even having a vote in the House. So in that regard, can you feel proud of our party for, in a way, putting scrutiny on Cabinet, who, for some of us, we feel you've lost your way?
No, completely.
You're taking too much control away from the people and Parliament.
Yes, in an emergency, you want the government to act quickly. But when you're dealing with a situation like this, which will sadly go on for some time to come, we absolutely need to be answerable to Parliament. People need to ask those tough questions, and asking tough questions mean that policy improves. Like I say, we've made some mistakes. We might have made fewer mistakes if at every turn we'd had the opportunity to have the debates that we're now going to have in order to ensure that we can test ideas and that we can also come together. Because the overwhelming majority of people in Parliament recognise that we need to act, but it's a good thing that within the Conservative Party you have a healthy debate. That's one of the great things about the Conservative Party. We're not scared of that.
And that's come through. That will now be happening. Government will be held to a greater account on what it is doing. Some of us voted against the fact that still have emergency powers ongoing for another period of time. But I think we should be proud of the fact that we're questioning and we're bringing that forward. So my question then is, when is the end point? When is it that you will be saying this is when the lockdown will be lifted? What do we have to get to to have that lockdown lifted?
I think we need to see the rate of infection fall. At the moment, we know that the infection rate is rising, particularly in the north of England, but not exclusively. And I think what we need to do is to make sure that we take all the measures necessary, because we want people to lead as normal a life as possible. Now, at the moment, we're prioritising getting and keeping children in school and getting and keeping people in work. And that means there are some restrictions, for example, on hospitality. We do want to lift them, but we do need to keep them in place until we can see that infection rate fall.
Yeah. And people, I think the British public have been on board and have been very pragmatic on that.
Yeah.
But as we go forward, if the economy is locked down for longer, you then have to see the consequences of that. People losing their jobs, poverty, the issues of that, and mental health. And that's why I think, well, when is the end game?
Oh, totally. And I think one of the things you're absolutely right is people are prepared to make sacrifices, but they do want to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So one of the things that we're doing is obviously investing in making sure that we have more testing so that more people can be rapidly tested, get back to work, and also making sure that we invest in a vaccine. If we can get that, that will ensure that things return to normal. And we're also investing in the new treatments like dexamethasone that mean that if people do catch the virus, they've got a far better chance of avoiding, a serious illness. So all of this comes together, but it is, as lots of other countries are experiencing, a particularly nasty disease, and we all have to work together in order to eradicate it. I think it will be a difficult winter, but I think that by spring, I think we will be in a stronger position. And of course, Rishi's doing an amazing job, doing everything he can in order to support people to stay in work and to acquire the skills they need in order to get new jobs.
And the other question on the ground is really the arbitrary nature of which they think things have happened. So first of all, you're told don't wear masks,
yes,
and now it is wear masks. First of all, there wasn't a quarantine, and now there is a quarantine if you're flying abroad, and they're not getting this. How are you, as a cabinet minister, going to reassure the public that it isn't arbitrary?
I think we have to take people with us by demonstrating what the evidence is. And when you do have new discoveries about a new disease, then that new evidence can enable you to say, actually, this is a better way of tackling it. And I think there's been a widespread acceptance that some of the restrictions that we have are absolutely necessary, but as we discover more about the disease, then we can fine-tune exactly what it is that we do. So when it comes to quarantine, we've tried to be as flexible as possible. So it's still possible for people to travel to Greece, but there are some islands that people shouldn't travel to because the rate of infection is higher. Similarly with Portugal, mainland Portugal is still a difficult place, but for people who are going to Madeira and the Azores, they're safer. And we apply the same thing regionally in the UK as well. And I think it's difficult sometimes when you see that Merseyside is locked down, but the southwest of England isn't. But I think it's better to try to deal with it on a regional basis rather than to have a blanket national lockdown.
Are you seeing any patterns forming there? Are there, in the main, Labour councils coming forward wanting regional lockdowns?
No, I think it's in different parts of the country. So we've had the Conservative leader...
Manchester, you've had Liverpool,
oh,
you've
yes,
had Bradford.
Yes, and we've also had the Conservative leader of Bolton, and we've also had Conservative local government figures in the northwest and the northeast saying, yes, we want a lockdown as well. I think, again, it depends on specific circumstances. But one of the reasons why it may well be that there are some areas which do have Labour local government that are particularly affected is just because at the moment, some of our biggest cities have Labour mayors and Labour leaders, and the virus spreads more quickly in cities than it does in areas where the population is more spread out.
So we're not, though, waiting for a vaccine to lift the lockdown?
No, we hope that we can make progress on a vaccine, but of course what we want to do is to make sure that we've got lots of measures in place. And if we can make sure that the virus transmission gets down below the rate at which it is at the moment, then we are able to lift more and more of the measures that are currently in place.
Well, from the blue collar group, I think their businesses want to know
yeah,
the economy is opening back up. They want to know they've got a livelihood and they've got money, and they also believe in personal responsibility.
Yes.
So clearer instruction from government, 1 metre plus or wear a mask, but let us get on with our daily business and existence, because long term we're going to really suffer. So we're saying, give us some responsibility, yes, and we will pay you back and the country and the economy back.
I completely agree. And the Conservatives are the party of personal responsibility. And we trust people to do the right thing. There are a small minority who haven't, and that's why the police in certain circumstances intervene. But overall, you're absolutely right, Esther. What we want to do is to recognise that the backbone of this country, the people who create wealth, who pay for our NHS, we need to be foursquare behind them. They understand that there can be restraints sometimes, but they want the government to level with them, and that's what we're pledged to continue to do. Esther, Blue Collar Conservatives is an amazing initiative. What you've achieved is fantastic. There have been hundreds of thousands of people who've been tuning in to your broadcasts. That's great. I think one of the most important things that we need to do over the course of the next 4 years is remember who voted us into power. Our friend Eric Pickles, our chum, used to say, dance with the one who brung you. In other words, make sure that you keep your promises and that the people who put you into power and gave you responsibility are at the forefront of your mind. Well, we know it's the working class, blue collar backbone of Britain that gave us that majority, so we've got to keep the faith.
Welcome to Blue Collar Conversations, and we're live at the Blue Boar in Westminster. And talking of boars, yes, he's back again, Philip Davis, MP there. Haven't you got a home to go to, Philip?
No, I haven't. No, not while you're here, anyway.
So I'm allowed to say this, you see, married not even 2 weeks, and we can have little banter like this going together. But equally, he's joined by his co-conspirator, Paul Baldwin there, a journalist at The Express. But this really is the part of the conference where we talk about your opinions, your views, what's been going on, what you've been saying, how you've been voting on The Express's polls. And one of those polls, because we were talking about it yesterday, is do prisons work? And the poll came through, 34% said yes, 64% no, and don't know was 2%. So, Philip, you're an advocate of prisons. Are you surprised so many people thought it didn't work?
I'm surprised in the sense that I think really if people were given a choice between should people be sent to prison or should they be given a community sentence, I think most people would say I'd sooner they went to prison. I suspect the reason why prisons got such a low level of support in the poll is because people think prisons are too cushy, they've got gyms, they get, too much of an easy ride in prison. So I suspect the vote is more of a reflection on that rather than a view that we should let all the criminals out of prison and let them roam the streets committing crimes.
Yeah, so that's how you've justified it to yourself.
That's how I've seen it, yeah, exactly.
And so that's what we were talking about yesterday. But today, really, the conversation has moved to coronavirus, lockdowns, maybe confusion over the rules, what it means to you, what's happening in the Parliament with, are the rules being scrutinised enough there? And so our question today was, are people in your area following the COVID-19 rules? Now, this was the result that came through in the Express. Yes, 32%. No, 6%, don't know 8%. So you're saying that 60% of people aren't following the rules. And 19, Denbo, 48, said, look, COVID is there, it's real, it's a flu, it's a bad flu. Yes, it could well be a killer, but it is now going to be around forever and we've got to get used to it. So that's what he's saying. Growler, of course, the people in many regions aren't following the guidelines, that's why it's spreading. John from Cheshire said, I wonder how many MPs, civil servants, local government councillors and senior police officers, judges, lawyers, university managers and heads of department are following those rules. How many are using the app? How many are having flu vaccinations? You see, so he's got a big question on whether the people setting the rules are actually living by the rules. Somebody else here, CJJ1, in my area, I'd say 9 out of 10 are following the rules, some of them aren't. So different people have got different views, but they are saying, no, they're not. And some people have said, do you know what, we're just not watching the news anymore. It's depressing us. We're staying in, we're locked in. We just don't want to watch the news anymore. So what's that about? Did that surprise you as a journalist from The Express? Has that surprised you what the readers have said?
I don't think the figures surprised me. Perhaps the honesty surprised me, because quite often when you do a poll, people tend to sometimes tell you what you want to hear rather than what they're actually doing. But I think it's not surprising that I think people are just mystified. I mean, if the Prime Minister is mystified by his own rules, what chance have the rest of us got, really? And I mean, literally, it seems to change from day to day, and people are probably not following the rules because they just don't understand them anymore.
So confusion and complexity, is that down to us, Philip?
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I think the other thing is as well, I think people will follow the rules when they think there's a point to them. I think at the start, when we were in a lockdown and there was a clear reason that we needed to be in a lockdown so that the NHS could build up the capacity it needed to, that was the reason for the lockdown. Let's not forget that was the reason. The lockdown wasn't there to save lives, it was there to give the NHS time, spread out the problem, to give the NHS time to build up capacity to deal with it. And people understood that, they got behind it and all the rest of it. Now some of the rules just seem so completely arbitrary. There's no rationale behind them. And so when people think, actually, do you know what, they're just making this up as they're going along. They're telling us one thing one day, you know, at the start of the pandemic, you know, if you wearing a face mask was about as much use as a one-legged man in an arse-kicking contest. Today you can barely get off your sofa without putting a face mask on, or else you're going to drop dead. You know, quarantine rules, they weren't needed when we first had the height of the pandemic. Now, any country you go to, virtually, you've got to be in quarantine. So people have come to, you know, that's why people lose faith and think, well, hold on a minute, these people who we had on a pedestal at the start, thinking that they're some kind of world's leading authorities, these are just making it up as they're going along. These people, they've got no idea what they're talking about. So I'm not going to follow what he's got to say because I don't think he knows what he's talking about. There's no wonder people lose faith in the advice when it changes so violently on a virtually weekly basis.
Paul?
The only piece of advice I've heard so far that I 100% agreed with was when Chris Whitty, God bless him, was trying to explain that this pandemic was made worse by aerosols. And I thought, yeah, I think we've figured that out for ourselves actually, Chris, unless I misheard you. But it's so confusing. Unless you follow the news day to day, I do, it's my job, but my mum doesn't. You don't know where you are. You just don't know where you are from day to day.
So a simpler set of rules could have been easier if they'd say it's a metre plus, keep your distance, the hygiene, washing your hands, absolutely, and the other one, wear face masks. But when they're saying the rule of 6, when they're saying what you can do inside, outside, what you can do in a lockdown area, and then equally what's law and what's only guidance, whether you can eat out, or sometimes the arbitrary nature when people were saying as lockdown was lifting, you could go to a barber's and have a sort of a close shave, but you couldn't go to beauticians and have sort of a facial, or you could go to a arcade, you could go to a bingo hall, but you couldn't go to a casino. I think that arbitrary nature and it going very complex, maybe that's made people question it. Is that really the case? Do you think that was it? The complexity?
Well, it's not just that. I mean, I just think this whole sort of nanny state socialist approach, really, we are basically trying to micromanage everybody's lives, is I think it's counterproductive, and it's just not justifiable. I mean, really, as a Conservative, really, to me, what the government should have done, and certainly should be doing now, is to say to people, look, this is what's important. What's important is social distancing, washing your hands, whatever it might be. This is what's important. Yeah, absolutely. This is what's important. And but the second bit of what they should say to people is, these are the people who are most prone, most at risk from getting the disease. So over 70s, maybe ethnic minorities, people who are obese, people who've got underlying health conditions. Right, you now know all the information you need to know. It's now up to you to decide what level of risk you want to take based on all of that information. So, you know, my mum can make her own mind up when she knows all of that information as to whether or not she wants to go and visit her grandchildren at their house. She doesn't need the state to tell her you can or you can't. She's more than capable of making that decision for herself. And I think this sort of nanny state socialist approach is completely unjustifiable. We should believe in individual responsibility and let people make their own mind up about what level of risk they're prepared to take. And, you know, there'll always be some people who don't follow the rules. Well, whatever rules you set, they're just not going to follow them anyway. So the people who are responsible can make their own mind up as to what they're going to do based on that kind of information. And that would not collapse the economy in the way that we are doing at the moment, which is going to cause huge health problems in its own right and lots of people out of work. You know, that would be a much more sensible Conservative approach to dealing with it. Let people decide for themselves how much risk they want to take.
And are you a risk taker, or are you somebody with a mask on? Have you been working from home, Paul?
I'm a chicken, right? So I tend to err on the side of caution. But just as a real-time example of how nuts this is and how inconsistent the message is that's coming out of government. Right now, I travelled here tonight on 2 trains, or a train and a tube, and I was masked up completely. And it wasn't until I got a pint in my hand, I could take my mask off and get drunk, presumably, at some point, if I wanted to. And none of that makes any sense. It just doesn't make any sense that at the point where I'm likely to break social distancing rules, I'm allowed to demask. It just doesn't make it. And I think that, you know, ordinary people are just thinking, what? There's no consistency. There's no sense to it. And unless there's that, we can't get behind it. That's the problem. We're starting to lose faith in the message. So we're not following.
And I think what other people are saying, and actually these were in the Express today in their figures, when people are saying, yes, we know more people will now either have COVID or more people were aware that they've got COVID because we're doing more and more testing, but they're saying how many more people are in hospital, what is the sort of death rate, how is it impacting on us. So today there's 2,200 or thereabouts patients in hospitals, that's today, but back in April there were 17,000 people in hospital. So what they're saying is, well, there's far less now, so why are we doing greater lockdown? And at the same time there's 100,000 hospital beds, so we've got less than 2% are being taken by COVID. Now, Philip, you've been doing freedom of information on what people, what the death rates are for various illnesses, and what's that showing so far? I'll say so far, but what's that information coming back as?
Well, just for example, this year more people have died in the UK of flu and pneumonia than have died of coronavirus. And so we don't lock down the whole country because of flu and pneumonia. We don't sort of overprotect people over that. We let people make their own decisions. We give them the information and let them trust people to make the right decisions. I don't really see why we don't do the same over this. But and this is we've got to remember there's a vaccine for flu, and there's still more people dying of flu and pneumonia in the UK than are dying of coronavirus. So this idea that we're waiting for the holy grail of a vaccine is also a load of old nonsense, to be perfectly honest.
And not only that, the flu vaccine doesn't work every year 100%. Some years it's down to 20, 30, 40, whatever, 50%. Yes.
Yeah, the flu vaccine itself changes every year based on,
the strain.
They look at what happened in Australia and they try and second guess that the same thing will happen here. And the vaccine is there to try and, to do that. And maybe a vaccine for coronavirus will be the same. I don't know, but it's not the panacea that everybody's waiting for. And so my view is, where are we going to be with all this? Are we becoming such a snowflake country that if anybody dies of anything or there's any level of deaths of anything, we're going to just shut down the whole country to stop it from happening? Because that is just never how we've approached anything in the past, and I hope we get out of that kind of snowflake agenda.
And are you writing things about this, Paul? When is the lockdown going to lift? Are you looking at things from a journalist point of view in the round? What is this going to mean? Because already we're seeing, what is the diagnosis rate of people with, cancer? How many people are being seen? What is the death rate of people who aren't getting into hospital because they've got other illnesses? Is this coming forward to you as a journalist? Are people knocking on your door saying, I can't get this and I can't get this treatment?
It's absolutely. I mean, it's the story of the moment, and it's not just about the government line, it's about the backstories and the real stuff that's going on underneath. And I mean, it's things like more people are dying in household accidents than are dying from coronavirus, stuff like that, which gives you some perspective. But as Philip was saying, we have to somehow find a way of working with this and stop being so scared of it that we're too scared to go to work, and because the economic fallout of this hasn't even begun to be felt yet. We're in this buffer zone, which we've got the furlough scheme and various other schemes which have hidden the true economic fallout of this. But it's vast. I did a few numbers the other day, and the money we've spent already, if we paid that back at the same rate we paid back the debt we owed the Americans at the end of the Second World War, we'd be paying it back to the year 2750 or something. It's not just 50 years or 100 years, it's hundreds of years. The amounts of money are enormous, and we need to bring that into the equation much more than we are doing now.
And of course...
And the job losses.
And the job losses.
I mean, we're going to be... I mean, unemployment, I shudder to think what unemployment's going to be in a year's time. I mean, we could be talking 4 million, 5 million people, 5 million unemployed in this country. They're literally people's jobs, people's businesses, people's livelihoods are being sacrificed at the altar of this kind of socialist approach to managing a risk, when people are more than capable of making these decisions for themselves. Fine, I don't mind the government giving out guidance to people, but we're talking this is the law of the land and people have to follow it, even though people are more than capable of making these decisions for themselves.
And tomorrow, actually, we've got, as our Cabinet Minister in response to Blue Collar Conservatism Conference, we're speaking to Rishi. We'll also be meeting people who run their own business, but they didn't get any support. That's Forgotten Limited and people who are, sole traders or have got a limited company, and they're going to be telling our story. So this conversation and this fallout with jobs is real, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow night. Now, I did actually say earlier on today to Michael Gove, when will we be able to lift up the lockdown? So I've got a clip here of me speaking to him. I said, will we be looking for a vaccine? Will it be before then? When will we be able to lift up lockdown? Not though waiting for a vaccine to lift the lockdown.
No, we hope that we can make progress on a vaccine, but of course what we want to do is to make sure that we've got lots of measures in place, and if we can make sure that the virus transmission gets down below the rate at which it is at the moment, then we are able to lift more and more of the measures that are currently in place.
So that was Michael Gove there saying we won't be waiting for a vaccine. He's saying that obviously the R rate has got to go down, but we won't be waiting for a vaccine. And I'd imagine that's common sense, because you don't know when it's coming forward. I mean, he talks about it is all about personal responsibilities, but are we seeing that?
Well, I mean, Matt Hancock put a tweet out yesterday saying that we're going to have these restrictions until we get a vaccine. So, I mean, he said something completely different, and we could be waiting. Who knows when there's going to be a vaccine? We could be waiting years for a vaccine, one that works, one that's properly tested. We may never have, like the flu, one that's entirely successful anyway. The economic destruction that will be done waiting for a vaccine doesn't even bear thinking about. And nobody's talking about the health consequences of that. I mean, you go to Venezuela and Zimbabwe and ask people what the health consequences are of collapsing the economy. This is so short-sighted. And what's really scaring me is that, how easily in a democracy people can be frightened into giving up their freedom so readily, voluntarily, virtually. How a state can just basically frighten you into voluntarily giving up your hard-won freedoms. I find it really, really scary. And for a Conservative government to be doing this, I just find it completely
well, maybe
very sad.
Maybe you shouldn't find it so scary when the Express poll said they think 60% aren't now abiding by the full lockdowns. Maybe they are questioning these things. Maybe the public's beginning to say, we can live with it, we will adapt to it, we will take precautions, we will look after our elderly. But as you say, how do we get back to working? We've got to put a meal on the table, we've got to pay our bills. It's fine to have a mortgage holiday for 6 months, but at the end of that 6 months you carry on paying. It's not disappeared. Are those, do you think, all of the questions people are now having in their mind if they're not necessarily living to the lockdowns? Is that what they're thinking? What's coming next?
I think there's two things here. The government have to spell out the message much more clear than they're doing, and they have to trust the public to do their part and to act like grown-ups that we are, not over-regulate and bring in law after law without even going through Parliament in some cases. Because I think if they don't win over the public and bring us on side, I think there's a real possibility of civil unrest in this country. We're seeing the students, which you kind of expect that anyway, sort of rebelling already at various campuses around the place. The public will just say, no, I'm not having it. Unless the government wins them over with simple, precise, believable information and the trust that they're grown up enough to put that information into practical use.
And you will have seen MPs too saying we need now to be questioning these rules. We gave you emergency powers 6 months ago in March because this was an emergency, this was unprecedented, we didn't know what we were dealing with, and this was nobody'd seen it before, and the government went forward. But now actually within Parliament, isn't there, people are saying now we want votes on what's going forward. Maybe not as bold as you and me, Philip, who actually voted against the continuation of emergency laws, but other people are saying we need votes, we need to question. And you stood up in the House today because this is another concern to people. Why 10 p.m. curfew? Why 10 p.m. and not 10:30? If everybody's rushing to the streets buying booze from the local off licence and congregating in rules, what is going on?
Yeah, no, I think there is a change in public opinion. I've detected it in the correspondence from my constituents over the last week or two. I think there is a shift that's taking place. Might be slow, but I think it's definitely happening. I mean, my view is that, you know, by next year, when 4 or 5 million people have lost their jobs, there will be a massive backlash. There will be a massive backlash, but it'll be too late then. People need to. I think just people need to be aware of what's coming down the line, what the consequences of all this are, because they're not going to like it. They are really not going to like it, and I think the public are. I think there is a change in public opinion to a certain extent, and I think you're right. There is a change in opinion amongst MPs who are less likely to just go along with it. I think we were happy to give the government emergency powers at the start because they said we need them to give the NHS time to build capacity. Now that's no longer an excuse, and to me the government are abusing those powers. They've gone power mad, and we shouldn't in Parliament just be giving the government free rein to bring in any powers it wants to when they're not justified anymore.
And, all these issues, you don't get one, they all come along together. We've got COVID, the biggest thing in generations, people are saying, but at the same time, we're also dealing with Brexit. People are saying, and we're getting close now, so one of those key dates is October the 15th. I know, again, we had a poll today in the Express. Would you be happy with Britain leaving the EU without a trade deal? And the votes here was 95% of Express readers said yes, they would be happy without a trade deal. No, 5%. So that was categorically in one way they would happy to leave that deal. And then we've got K-Chops 4. I personally think the no deal option is becoming more favourable as it will need to be a clean break. Peter Law, 11, a trade deal can only work if it benefits both sides, and at the moment that doesn't seem possible. Mark Reed should have walked away 4 years ago. The people did not vote for a deal to carry on and filling up. He's put the EU's coffers. Clean break is what we should have done going back to 2016. So some real sort of clear views there. And somebody else saying, who's this Apsley boy, is saying any agreement now is going to have the rancid smell of a stitch-up. So they're not even looking forward to that. So these could be key Brexiteers coming in saying, what we don't want is a fudge, is what they're saying. What we don't want is some form of capitulation and a bad deal. You said straight away there, Paul. Is that what you feel your readers are saying now? We don't want a bad deal?
Well, that is the sense of overwhelming frustration that Brexit still hasn't been done. We had Brexit means Brexit, and Theresa May banging on what seems like a lifetime ago now. And then Boris came in and on the mandate of get Brexit done. His entire election was based on that, to be honest. And it's not been done. And there's still the two major sticking points which just seem to be intractable, which is state aid and fishing. And it just doesn't seem beyond the wit of man that the state aid thing baffles me, because the EU want us to sign up to basically remain that bit of us to remain in the EU, so we're not allowed to help out industries and that sort of thing. But if you look across the channel, Peugeot and Citroën are 14% state owned. So how is that not state aid? It's so hypocritical. It's nonsensical. And then of course the fishing thing is. For us, we're an island nation. It's totemic for us. It's a really important deal. It's out of perspective of its actual financial sort of clout. I think the car industry is worth about 82 billion, and the fishing industry is worth about 1.2 billion. That doesn't really matter. It's about sovereignty. It's about our waters, and the EU can't get its head around this. Or at one point when Barnier said, you can have the waters, that's fine, we just want the fish.
That's kind of it, wasn't it? Now, I spoke and asked both of those questions to Michael Gove a little bit earlier on. Here's a clip here, and this is him talking about Brexit, and I said, will it happen? Whether it is with a deal or without a deal, and this was the answer that Michael Gove gave to me a little bit earlier on.
We will absolutely make sure that whether or not we get a deal with the EU in the course of the next few weeks, we're out. That's it. December the 31st, no single market, no customs union. We take back control of our borders. We have a points-based immigration system. We're able to spend our money on our priorities, on the NHS, and on making sure that people's jobs are protected.
So Michael Gove, they're unequivocal. We are out. Whether it's with a deal, without a deal, we are out. Do you feel confident, Philip?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I think, I might not be quite so supportive of the government over coronavirus, but I think on Brexit, Boris's government has been absolutely resolute throughout. I don't think anybody really can argue with that. I mean, I think the poll's interesting because I think it shows a lack of trust in politicians, really. I think that people are saying, well, if there is a trade deal, then we must have capitulated, we must have given the EU what they want, and we don't really trust you to have held the line, and therefore the only reason we know you've held the line is if there's no deal.
So let me come in there and probe that a little bit. So it wasn't that they necessarily want by 95% no deal. What they're saying is, we're uncertain now if it's going to be a good deal, and that's what we're worried about, how good the deal is from the politicians, not that they wanted a no deal, and that's how you read that result.
I think so. I mean, look, nobody's more committed to Brexit than me. I mean, I set up Better Off Out in 2006, long before it was fashionable.
You all over that, Philip, not fashionable.
I've been banging on about this for years. So literally nobody could be more hardline on Brexit than me. I want a comprehensive free trade deal with the EU because I believe in free trade. Free trade brings prosperity. I don't want tariffs on products that I buy from the EU, and I don't want them to have to pay tariffs on when they buy British products. I want free trade, but I don't want any deal. And I think this is what Express readers, this is how I see it, like me, they don't want any deal, and they certainly don't want a deal which keeps us shackled to EU rules and regulations in perpetuity. That would be completely and utterly unacceptable, and I'd sooner have no deal than be shackled to EU rules and regulations in the future, because that's what we want voted to leave so we could set our own rules. But as long as we can guarantee that we're not shackled to any EU rules and regulations forever, I would sooner prefer to have a free trade deal because that is better for our businesses and it's better for our prosperity.
All right, well, this is another question I asked Michael Gove earlier, and that was about the fisheries, because that's where people are getting a little bit concerned. They're thinking, is the government wobbling over the fisheries and our waters? And this was Michael Gove's answer earlier.
There's no way that we're going to back down on fishing. My dad ran a fish merchant's business. That business went to the wall in the 1980s as a result of the EU and their common fisheries policy. So it's personal for me. But the PM and David Frost have been crystal clear with the EU. These are our waters, these are our fish. We're going to decide who has access to our waters on our terms.
So Michael Gove standing firm on that, the fishing rights, those quotas.
I think it would be almost suicidal to do anything but stand by the fishing industry at this point. As I say, it's become such a huge issue, bigger than its financial clout really. But it's part of being British. We're a maritime nation, and it's really important to us. So I don't think they will bend on that, and we can hopefully. I was in Fleetwood a few months ago actually, doing a piece on the collapse of the fishing industry there, and it was tragic really. It was awful. It was what the EU did, the common fisheries policy mainly, and then this thing called decommissioning, where they paid some of the fishermen to destroy their vessels so they could never fish again. So this craft that had been in families for generations just ended at a stroke. And it killed off Fleetwood and places like Fleetwood around the country. We can start to rebuild from there. That's the point. I mean, some of the lads who used to work on the trawlers in the 60s and 70s were saying that from January the 1st, you can't there's no point in having no EU vessels because we haven't got the manpower or the boats to fish the waters properly. Just lease the waters. This was the trawlerman telling me this. Just get some sort of lease deal. So yes, you can come back in. Well, not your super trawlers if you don't mind. They're disgusting, hideous things that just destroy marine environments. But there was some sort, and that's not a fudge. That's just good economics and good politics.
Well, I'm going to ask you that. Will people think it's a fudge? You use the word there. Will people say, actually, you didn't then get your rights back to those waters and the ability to fish there? Will they view that as the outcome if you do lease it back, or do you just think it's a common sense way to go as we build up our capability to fish our waters?
I think it would be a harsh view. I'll say that view was from the lads who used to fish the waters.
But so they see that as a common sense
absolutely,
approach.
Totally, yeah. We just haven't got the boats and the manpower. We have to rebuild and start from almost scratch, right? Which is fine. So no, I don't think it's a fudge. The other thing is that I think we're closer to a deal than we're led to believe.
Well, I think that's what Michael Gove was saying. At the moment, it's a lot of posturing.
Yeah.
I guess you're trying to destabilise each other, aren't you, by saying, oh, they're wobbling, and he's saying, actually, Michael Gove said to me, it's not the UK wobbling, actually, it's more the EU wobbling, and they're both putting out stories in their paper.
Our chap in Brussels, Joe Barnes, who's been all over this story, he lives and breathes it, right? I was talking to him this afternoon, and he was sort of intimating, if he was a gambling man, he'd say there's a deal. And what they're really working on now, he thinks, is a way for both of them, for Barnier and Frost to go back to their, or Boris really to go back to their relative countries and, wave a piece of paper saying, we have victory, we know how they both can do that, which is a hard trick to pull off. But I'd say Joe, who's been very, very close to this story for 5 years or whatever, he thinks we're closer than we might believe.
Well, I've only heard good words about David Frost.
Yeah,
I mean, I've met him, I've worked with him myself. I was impressed with, I guess, it was his vision of where he was going. And when I say the simplicity of his argument, I'm not undermining the complexity of it, but he had a very clear view of where he was going and articulated it very simply. So I think that has put us in good stead. Philip, are you feeling confident? You're nodding there.
Yeah, no, I've been very impressed with David Frost throughout the process. He's been, he's been very resolute, he's been robust, he hasn't given in. I mean, if you remember, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, we had Ollie Robbins, who just seemed to be giving in to the EU's demands on a weekly basis. I don't detect that from David Frost. He's been very, very hard line, and I think it may well pay dividends with a deal. I mean, like I say, I hope there is a deal. It makes sense for there to be an economic relationship between the two. It just doesn't make sense for us to be controlled by the EU. That's the bit that doesn't make sense. But a trade deal makes sense, and it's in the EU's best interest because, of course, they buy £90 billion a year more from us than we buy from them. So there'll be lots of countries in the EU. I'm sure Germany selling all their BMWs and Mercedes, and Ireland would be economically crippled if we didn't have a trade deal with the UK. So there's a very great incentive for the EU to do a deal, and David Frost, I think, will be proved right to have been hardline throughout the negotiations.
Did you have some news you were going to say about suing the UK?
Oh, well, this Ursula von der Leyen today announcing that she's going to sue Boris and the UK. Her British friends, the most passive-aggressive press conference. I was saying earlier on, she kept using this phrase to our British friends, to our friends in the UK, and I was thinking, friends like that, love.
You're such good friends, we're now going to sue you.
We're now going to sue you, exactly.
But again, is this posturing? We're getting close. It's the 15th of October. We're sort of literally days away from a key moment in those negotiations.
Nothing will ever come of it. The speed the EU moves, anyway. If anything did come of it, we'd be long dead by the time it did, But it won't. It's just it's a technical breach. It's a change to a piece of legislation. Like that's the first time that has ever happened. Legislation is changed and amended all the time. The American Constitution was supposed to be the last word in democracy. It's been amended 28 times because they didn't get it right the first time. Now, if they didn't get that right the first time, then the withdrawal agreement can have a few amendments as well, I think. And there are...
And that's how we do law, isn't it? By new laws, making them relevant to today, what is needed, how we're dealing with things, how we're coping with things, so that moving on. But I think you were right, Philip, what we want there, we want the free trade agreements. And it's got to be a win-win, so that notion that Boris can go to the public and, you know, the EU can feel they've got something to... Do you think we'll ever get that? So both can feel that they've won something. I mean, that is an impressive thing to achieve, isn't it? That both sides think that they've won.
Well, I think if we end up with a free trade deal, both sides have won. Both sides will benefit from free trade. I mean, that's the whole great thing about free trade. It is a win-win. So that's where I hope we'll end up. And like I say, I think that the government have been, I think, resolute and brilliant throughout the whole Brexit period. It's taken years. I mean, we had 2 wasted years or 3 wasted years with Theresa May, but since Boris got going, I think the Brexit voters can feel reassured that he really has got a grip of this.
Right, well, I'm going to end on something more positive and light at the moment, because we've been out, as you know, right across the country speaking to people and doing vox pops with people. So I thought it was a fantastic clip about if Parliament wasn't in London, where should it be? And different people around the country were saying where they thought it should be. So here's our clip from the voice of the people.
Well, if Parliament came out of London, where would I want to be? I would want to be in Manchester Town Hall, because I'm a northerner.
If I took Parliament out of London, I'd probably put it in Manchester to give more power to the north.
I would say Manchester, because I'm a bit biased, because I like Manchester.
I think I'd like to base it in Carlisle, primarily to wind up Nicola Sturgeon, but more realistically, I think it would be fantastic in York.
So a lot of people are saying they think it should be in Manchester so we can have a voice of the north, and somebody saying I'd put it in Carlisle just to just to wind up Nicola Sturgeon.
I'd have it in Blackburn, frankly, because it is the centre of the country as well. So.
Yeah. Philip?
Oh, we certainly don't want it in Lancashire. We can rule that.
Yeah, War of the Roses. You've just started, Paul, in this small
They never
studio.
ended. The Wars of the Roses never ended. Let me tell you. So obviously Yorkshire is the centre of the universe and where all the common sense people are. So, but I think I don't think
you might have to pay for a new building.
At the
end wear that in Yorkshire.
No, exactly. At the end of the day, I think all this idea of moving Parliament away from London is nonsensical. I think what the solution would be is to have more people from Yorkshire in Parliament. that would be much more sensible.
That'd be a mistake.
Yeah, well, we don't want lots of Southerners in the Parliament in Yorkshire. We want lots more Yorkshire people in the Parliament in London.
In fact, talking about that, that's sort of how the BBC got it wrong when they moved to Salford. They didn't have all local people in Salford making the programmes. They just shipped everybody out from London to Salford. So you're quite right. It's not about moving the building. It's about having different people in there with different views and different ideas of how they want to sort of run the country. Okay, well, one other thing, and we've got another clip here, so this again made me smile, and that was, who would be your dinner guest? Which politician would be your dinner guest? Here it is.
Which politician, dead or alive, would I invite to a dinner party? For me, there can only be one option. That would most definitely be Winston Churchill. He's an incredible orator, a charming man, well-travelled, an inspirational leader, and a drunken scoundrel. Therefore, the ideal dinner party guest.
It's got to be Winston Churchill.
Dennis Skinner. He was still an MP at the age of 90 years old. And I loved him.
Probably Benjamin Disraeli. He was a very cool guy. He worked for a very strong female monarch, and he was revolutionary for his time.
Well, I would have Andrew Neil.
It's got to be Margaret Thatcher. And the reason I say that again is because I'd like to personally thank her for what she did for my father, who was a coal miner. He lived in what then was a coal-board-owned house, and I know that he longed to have his own house, and it was almost an impossibility until Margaret Thatcher came along.
Political dinner guests, lots of them went for sort of like Churchill, Dennis Skinner. Who dead or alive? Who would you have?
I think I'd have Jeremy Corbyn, because apparently you can have 9 people at your dinner party as long as one of them's Jeremy Corbyn, apparently.
Well, it probably wasn't for the food, because I think he said he liked a tin of beans cold, wasn't it? Scooping them out, so it wasn't for the food, but it was because you could squeeze more people. So are you one of those rule breakers? You're one of that
Clearly, yeah.
60% rule breakers. Philip, anybody?
Well, apart from you, obviously, as
a living.
Be shot dead if I didn't say that you'd be my first choice for a dinner guest. But if I'm excluding you, then
You'd be doing the cooking, though.
Nobody would want to be the guest if I was doing the cooking. But Eric Forth was my political hero when I first entered Parliament, and I still miss him. He died in 2006, and I still miss him massively. And I would love to have Eric back, and because he was great fun, great entertainment, as well as a fantastic politician. So I would love to have dinner with Eric Forth again, because, like I say, he was my mentor when I entered Parliament, and I still miss him massively now.
Happy memories there. What did he teach you as a mentor? What did he?
He taught me lots of things. He taught me that you can't pass legislation on just a worthy sentiment. That actually, when you pass legislation in Parliament, you're passing specific laws which somebody's going to have to implement and abide by, and a court's going to have to rule on, and therefore you can't just pass a law on a worthy sentiment. You've got to get the detail right.
And sometimes people don't get that or understand the workings of Parliament. So when people say things like, no, we won't let this bill go any further, it's not always because they don't agree with what the cause is or what people are trying to push through. They're saying you haven't scrutinised this bill, and if you're making it a law and you're making it illegal and you're putting on it a tariff by which you can be in prison, you've got to go through that full scrutiny. And frequently people will write stories in paper, oh, this person stood up against this law. No, they didn't. They stood up against the fact that people were trying to push it through quickly, and that is the way to bad law, by pushing it through really quickly.
We should get some good Brexit laws then, shouldn't we? Because
you've had long enough to get them right. Yes, best laws ever.
To scrutinise those, haven't we?
Yeah. But that's true, isn't it? I mean, frequently you'll hear the furore, won't you, of people saying, why didn't you push this through straight away?
Just because a bill has a nice title and a worthy sentiment doesn't mean to say that every aspect of what's in it makes sense or can't be improved or whatever. And so, Eric Forth taught me that you shouldn't be afraid to speak up and be awkward, even if it might be going against the grain. That actually you were doing something worthwhile, and that's what your job was in Parliament, to do that. Not just to say, oh well, it sounds very popular, so I'll just not even bother looking at it. We'll just nod it through.
Well, speaking up and being awkward, you obviously took those words to heart. And on that note, we're going to end here tonight. We're going to be back tomorrow. We've got Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, speaking tomorrow about when can we lift up lockdown, how are we going to support maybe some of the businesses that weren't supported before, and what is the future post-COVID for the country, for the economy and for our businesses. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow and we want to hear from you. So email us at opinion@bluecollarconservatism.co.uk. Blue Collar Conservatism is all about turning politics on its head and taking politics to the people.